Is there a verse in the Bible that says pride goes before a fall? And if so, where is that found? Think about that for a few seconds. Now, if you answered yes to that question, you would be correct, partly. And if you answered no, you'd also be partly correct. So how can that be? How can both be the right answer? Well, let's take a look at that verse to see where these words are found in Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 18. Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 18. This sermonette today, you're going to clarify the scripture, see what it really says, and what it means for us today. Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 18. In the New King James Version, it says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So yes, those words are found. Pride goes before a fall. But there are a few other words in between those words in this verse as well. So both answers to the question would be correct, or at least partly correct. So what does this verse mean, and how does it apply to us today? Let's look at it further. The word pride and proud are found nearly 100 times in the King James Version of the Bible. And about a third of those references are found in the book of Psalms and Proverbs. So obviously it is a significant subject. And it is an attitude that God dislikes. He hates it. The word pride, according to Strong's Hebrew and Greek dictionaries, has several meanings in English. And among them are arrogance, excellence, majesty, and swelling. To repeat that, it means arrogance, excellence, majesty, and swelling. And of course, the word swelling can be compared to being puffed up or leavening, as Paul writes about in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. But the word pride is used in this verse, in Proverbs 16, verse 18, comes from the Hebrew word, another Hebrew word actually, meaning to mount up or increase. To mount up or increase. And again, those meanings can be compared to leavening. So pride can thus be compared to leavening. Both puff up and are harmful attitudes for us to have. Webster's dictionary defines pride as excessive self-esteem and behavior that shows this. Excessive self-esteem and behavior that shows this. There are a number of synonyms of the word pride that have similar meanings. Among them are arrogance, conceit, egotism, haughtiness, loftiness, pretension, self-glorification, and vanity. That's quite a list. Go over that again. Arrogance, conceit, egotism, haughtiness, loftiness, pretension, self-glorification, and vanity. Now, these are obviously characteristics that we should be avoiding as followers of Christ. And again, the comparisons to leavening are also evident. So we could substitute any one of those words for the word pride in order to expand the meaning. So let's go on to the next part of the verse. It says, pride goes before destruction. And the word destruction comes from the Hebrew word meaning fracture or ruin. To fracture or ruin. The Hebrew root means to burst, break, crush, hurt, or tear. To burst, to break, to crush, to hurt, or to tear. And again, substituting any one of those words makes the meaning clearer. And then the second part of this verse, and a haughty spirit before a fall. It's almost a duplicate of the first part of the verse. The meanings of the words are similar. So the point is emphasized through these words. A haughty spirit is a proud spirit. Strong's uses the word arrogance, which is another meaning of the word pride. In the New King James Version, verse 18 is followed immediately by verse 19. There are no line breaks, no line space between the two verses. And verse 19 offers the antidote to verse 18. At least it shows what our thoughts and behaviors should be. So verse 19 of Proverbs chapter 16. Better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. Better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. So what does all mean for us? The principle is simply that we must think and act in a humble manner. Humility, after all, is the opposite of pride. It's easy for us to feel a sense of superiority over others because we have been given God's Spirit. But if we truly have God's Spirit, then we won't have that attitude. And pride can be very subtle. It can lead to an attitude of self-reliance, an attitude of, I can do this on my own. I can go it alone. This is something we must be on guard against. We must look out for this. When we're filled with pride, we look down on others. And it will also lead us to falling out of favor with God. So pride is not just a physical characteristic, physical character trait, but it's also a spiritual one as well. We can have spiritual pride, and that too is wrong. Now, in times past, as an organization, we had the idea that we were the only ones who had God's Spirit. We were the only ones who were called by God. And we may have had that idea personally as well. So in effect, we were filled with pride, even though we probably didn't recognize it. Now, fortunately, that attitude is not nearly as prevalent today. But we must still guard against it. We must still guard against having an attitude of pride or an attitude of superiority over others. If we allow that mindset to fill us, then we will indeed be destroyed, and we will fall once again. And our whole society and our whole culture are based on pride. That's something we may not want to admit, or may not even realize it. But we also have to be aware of it. And that's part of the subtlety of pride. Yes, we do have God's Spirit, and yes, we are called by Him. But if we truly have God's Spirit dwelling us, we will be filled with humility, the opposite of pride. We won't be filled with excessive self-esteem, as Webster's defines pride. Or another way to put it, we won't be filled with that spirit of leaven. Pride sees faults in others. Humility recognizes faults within. Pride accuses others of pride and sees humility as weakness. Humility contains the power to conquer pride. So understanding pride is an important key to self-control. In the presence of pride, self-control will flee. Another truism is that self-control is a friend of humility. In fact, it is a loving relationship that produces righteousness. So what are the benefits of living with a spirit of humility? Well, let's look at Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 4. It's over a few pages. Proverbs 22 and verse 4. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Humility, as we've seen, is the opposite of pride. Humility is one of the blessings of having God's Spirit in us. Humility gives life. Pride leads to destruction. And there are many examples of pride found in the Bible. They're written there for us to learn from. There are numerous personal examples. King Nebuchadnezzar, for example. was one. And the results of living with an attitude of pride were very evident. The Sadducees and the Pharisees were also examples of pride. And there are admonitions in the Bible about having pride in our lives. These things are written in the Bible for us to learn from. In every case, pride did indeed lead to destruction. God hates pride, as mentioned a few times in the book of Proverbs. So Proverbs 16, verse 18 is but one verse, showing the dangers of having a proud attitude. Now, if you think about a balloon, for example, when you think about this verse, the balloon would represent pride. The balloon can take a certain amount of air, and thus it expands. It puffs up, if you will. But once it can't take any more air, and the air is still being pumped into it, it will burst. And the balloon will be destroyed. So pride will keep us from having a proper relationship with God. It will keep us from coming close and staying close to God. And this applies to each and every one of us. And this is one of the lessons of Proverbs 16, verse 18. Pride will lead to destruction, the destruction of ourselves. Of course, the ultimate example of pride was Satan. Lucifer had beauty, but that led to pride. And his pride was one of the keys that led to his destruction. If we're not careful, we can fall into that same trap. But that's what Proverbs 16, verse 18 is all about. It's a warning that if we become too puffed up in our own eyes and in our own mind, then we will be destroyed. It's happened in the past and can happen again. So we need to be careful. So what's the antidote to pride? Well, simply humility. Humility is the answer. So today we examined the verse in the Bible that contains the words, pride goes before a fall. And we saw the correct or the complete wording of that verse and what it means for us today. So let's take this verse to heart. Let's be on guard so we won't be destroyed by pride. Let's learn the lesson from Proverbs 16, verse 18.